Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Today, Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens is joined by Windsor Police Chief Pam Mizuno and Windsor Fire and Rescue Services Chief Stephen Lafayette to provide an update on the local response to the protest taking place along Huron Church Road within our city. In a moment, Mayor Dilkens will provide remarks. A Q&A session will follow. Welcome to our media members joining us in person and virtually. Those outlets joining us in person will be called upon one at a time at the end of the presentation. To the outlets joining via Zoom, please use the raise hand function to queue for a question in the Q&A, and you will be called on then, and your microphone will be enabled. Thank you for your attendance and participation today. I'll turn things over to Mayor Dilkens to start us off now. Please go ahead, Your Worship.
Well, thank you very much, Dana, and good afternoon, everyone. As you are aware, over the past 48 hours, the Ambassador Bridge has been impacted by protesters in a manner very similar to what has transpired on Parliament Hill. The difference here, however, is the significant impact on the busiest international border crossing in North America, and of course, locally on our own economy in Windsor-Essex. Now, I want to spend a moment talking about what's at stake here before I turn things over to the Windsor Police to provide a tactical update. The local transportation and warehousing sector is made up of 2,600 businesses employing over 10,000 people in Windsor-Essex. Those are 10,000 members of our own community. It is also an enabling sector that helps to move goods, people, and services. The Windsor-Detroit Trade Corridor is one of the busiest commercial border crossings in the world. It is estimated that more than $450 million in goods crosses the Windsor-Detroit border each and every day, representing 1/3 of all surface trade between Canada and the United States. More than 6,500 people residing in the Windsor-Essex area work outside of Canada, nearly all of whom commute across the Windsor-Detroit border. This includes healthcare workers that have spent the past 2 years saving lives on the front lines of this pandemic on both sides of the Detroit River. Windsor-Essex boasts an industry profile of more than 1,000 manufacturers, $4.5 billion in manufactured goods produced in annual GDP. That's 30% of the region's total GDP production. 90+ auto and parts manufacturers, and in excess of 2,500 machine, tool, and die and mold companies, which are all key components to the integrated global value chain. Windsor-Essex is home to the largest auto cluster in North America. Vehicle parts cross the border on average of 6 to 7 times before finished vehicles roll off the finish line. And 70 to 80% of Ontario's greenhouse produce is exported to the United States. There are over 3,200 acres of vegetable greenhouses in Ontario, with approximately 80% right here in Windsor-Essex. Ontario agriculture exports to the U.S. in 2016 totaled $684 million. Every hour this protest continues, our community hurts. Thousands of workers feed their families because of the commerce made possible at the Ambassador Bridge. Hundreds of local auto parts companies stay in business because of the movement of goods across the Ambassador Bridge. Our grocery store shelves are stocked with food because of the transport of food across the border. And I am very concerned about the lasting and permanent impact that this demonstration and protest will have on the region's economic competitiveness. Businesses require certainty. They require certainty of movement, with many operating, including our auto sector, on a just-in-time delivery model. If Canada becomes known as a difficult jurisdiction to do business with, to move goods in and out of, for example, then supply chains will evolve and reconfigure to remove this element of risk and avoid cities and communities like Windsor-Essex. These are issues that need to be considered as we seek to address the present situation. Closer to home, I'm concerned about the health, I'm concerned about the safety of our local residents. And to date, these demonstrations and this protest have been by and large peaceful and without incident. And I want to commend the men and women of the Windsor Police Service for all that they have done to de-escalate where required and to maintain security on site. In the past 24 hours, we have spoken with officials at both the provincial and federal governments. And here we are formally requesting additional resources. While we are hopeful the situation can be resolved in the near term, we need to plan for a protracted protest and have requested additional personnel to be deployed to Windsor to support our hardworking members of the police service. We are striving to resolve this issue safely and peacefully. My office has already received numerous complaints and calls from local residents and business owners advocating for the demonstrators to be forcibly removed. And while it may be gratifying for some to see the forced removal of the demonstrators, such action may inflame the situation and certainly cause more folks to come here and add to the protest. And we don't want to risk additional conflict. It is important to remember that we cannot ask our police services to risk the safety of all involved. Even in these circumstances, police services must consider the consequences of all of their actions and ensure that the safety of the public, including the protesters, are not put at risk. Police actions must be calculated and appropriately balanced. And at this time, our focus is on maintaining security and de-escalating the situation as much as possible. But make no mistake, our community will not tolerate this level of disruption for long. In a democracy, everyone has the right to protest peacefully. It's part of what makes Canada great. But the economic and social harm that these protests are having here in Windsor, in Ottawa, and across Canada is quite significant. The resolution to this will require a whole-of-government approach, with leadership required from Ottawa and Queen's Park to bring down the temperature and resolve these protests peacefully. And I want you all to know that I will do all that I can to safeguard the safety, the security, and the livelihood of Windsor residents. We need continued partnership with federal and provincial governments and no jurisdictional finger pointing. At this time, I'd like to call to the podium Chief Pam Mizuno of the Windsor Police Service to provide us with a tactical update before we take your questions. Chief.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm here this afternoon to provide an update on the most recent situation from here on Church Road. As of this morning, there are approximately 50 to 75 vehicles in the area and approximately 100 protesters. The situation is very fluid and we are continually assessing. Northbound traffic on Huron Church Road from Tecumseh Road West is blocked off. Please control this intersection and at this time are not allowing any traffic flow. The Ambassador Bridge can be accessed from Wyandotte Street. Southbound traffic into Canada is shut down, and this includes the exit from the bridge and access south of College Avenue. We have one lane open southbound on Huron Church Road for emergency vehicle access. Demonstrators are not interfering with traffic traveling east or west on College Avenue or Tecumseh Road and are cooperating at this time to allow emergency response capabilities for the City of Windsor. To reiterate, east and westbound traffic on College Avenue and Tecumseh Road is open for vehicular traffic. I cannot comment on specifics in regards to our operational plan, but I can tell you that our goal is to open all lanes of traffic on Huron Church Road. In order to do that, we are taking a diplomatic approach and attempting to negotiate a safe and sustainable resolution. I realize this is an emotional time for many and urge everyone involved not to jeopardize public peace or participate in purposely illegal events. To those engaged in the protest, we implore you to continue to speak with our officers on the ground. Impromptu road closures and walking demonstrations by the protest groups will hinder emergency response and will jeopardize those who need assistance. It is essential we have first responder access to the West End. I have heard from many business owners and citizens, and I too share your concerns. I understand that the Windsor Police Service respects the rights of Canadians to exercise their freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. However, I can assure you that the Windsor Police Service will not tolerate illegal or disorderly behavior, and we will investigate any criminal acts in accordance with legislative responsibilities. Our officers will resort to the level of intervention necessary to ensure the safety of the public and to maintain peace, order, and public security. The proper use of police discretion is a valid and appropriate approach to de-escalating situations. This should not be confused with a lack of enforcement. Throughout the pandemic, our officers have exercised this discretion when dealing with other unlawful activity relating to government mandates. In those instances, officers identified responsible parties at the scene and enforced the law by arresting or ticketing offenders when a lower risk opportunity presented itself. Before I conclude, I would like to take a moment to thank the members of the Windsor Police Service for their professionalism, patience, and dedication to duty. As we move into a third day of protest, I'm aware of the potential impact that a prolonged event may have on the well-being of our members. I'm appreciative of the ongoing support that we have received from the community and for their patience during this challenging time. I echo his worship's sentiment that no one agency can resolve this situation alone. Today, I will be forwarding a request to both provincial and federal officials looking to attain shared resources as we need them in the form of personnel and equipment. We rely on all levels of government to assist in resolving these protests peacefully and restoring calm to our city.
Questions in the room first? Good to see.
Yeah, our reporter, on the ground, this morning, he witnessed a truck with a Canada flag on it, passing police and joining the protest. I realize you say you're, taking a diplomatic approach here. Some people are also looking at it and saying, that, protesters are being handled with kid gloves. Can you address how does that back and forth go between you and protesters, and why would you be allowing the protest to grow?
So officers on the ground continually assess the situation, and they make their decisions based on what's before them and how the situation unfolds. So I can't speak to that specific incident, but I can tell you that our officers out there, they're continually assessing it and making those decisions based on what's happening before them.
Okay, and you mentioned, additional resources that are being asked for. That request hasn't gone out yet. It's something that's going out today. And if so, could you have asked for it in earlier days? Why is that request just going out now?
Okay, so our resources, we are working with the resources that we have right now. And again, we're looking at the situation that we have, and we're planning for what's potentially to happen as we move forward. So the resource request is being made to address any needs that we may need as we move forward with this situation.
Okay, and when you say provincial and federal, who specifically is that? What departments are you making those requests to?
So for the provincial, it's the emergency preparedness, or sorry, for the federal, it's emergency preparedness, and provincially, we'll be looking to the Solicitor General.
We'll move to CTV.
You mentioned yesterday that some tickets have been issued. Maybe you can give us an indication of how many tickets, what these tickets were for. Were they Highway Traffic Act? Were they speeding tickets, idling tickets? Where do we go?
So there were 4 tickets issued. I believe it was on Monday night and Monday. None were issued yesterday, and they were for moving violations.
Okay. I guess, how long will they be allowed to remain?
So again, we're working with communicating with the protesters, with the demonstrators, working with representatives from the groups that are out there. There are a couple of groups. We're speaking to representatives there. And as I said, public safety is the #1 priority, and we're looking to restore traffic flow in the area. Some traffic flow, but the goal is to have Huron Church Road open.
How closely are you watching what's happening in Ottawa, and what lessons are you taking from that and applying here?
So we are watching Ottawa. We've continually watched Ottawa. We were aware that we ended up with protesters attending the Ambassador Bridge, taking lessons. There are lessons to be learned from there. I'm not going to speak to any specific operational tactics or moves that we'll be using, but we have taken some of the lessons learned there and applied them.
Blackburn.
Mayor Dilkens, you mentioned additional resources as well. Are these separate from what the police service is requesting?
No, they're the same, and the chief and I are in communication. The chief is speaking with the commissioner of the OPP. I've been meeting and spoken with the Solicitor General today, the Premier, Minister Mendocino, and outreach from several other federal ministers as well. So we're all very coordinated and in touch with what the situation is like on the ground. And I think it's fair to say that at all levels of government in this country, everyone understands what's at stake when this border crossing is closed. It's worth saying that almost a full third of international trade between the United States and Canada crosses at the Ambassador Bridge. And so when this bridge is closed for an hour, it is noticed by the auto sector immediately, it's noticed by the greenhouse sector and many others. When it's closed for a number of days, people start demanding action, and we hear you. And we're not going to let this happen for a prolonged period of time. I don't think the federal government will let it happen, the provincial government or the municipal government. There will have to be a resolve one way or the other. And I'm not saying that to suggest that, we're going to go in with battering rams and 1,000 police officers. That may not be the solution, but there has to be a resolution to get this border crossing open so that we do not impact the economies of the United States and Canada, and further put people, hardworking men and women who want to go to work, who are already challenged by a chip shortage in the auto sector, who are already, facing layoffs this year because of things like that. We're not going to further disadvantage those families who want to go to work and earn, put food on the table for their families.
Second, third time, you're not gonna allow this to go on for days on end, so you're not putting 1,000 people on. So what is the solution? What is that for you?
Well, I think there's lots of talk between all levels of government, lots of talk with the OPP and the chief and all of the police resources as well to figure out what that looks like. I absolutely commend the chief and the entire team for the negotiation that they've been able to undertake with the protesters to be able to have traffic moved out of the northbound lane. So you can see that right now. But don't forget, you were dealing in many ways, at least here locally, you're dealing with a bit of a leaderless group. It's not like there's one person you can go to and try and find a resolution. There are pockets of people who are here. They're not all here for the original mandate of the Freedom Convoy in terms of how it started. And I'm sure if you asked 100 folks who are here, you'd probably get a different list of what their top 3 important issues are from almost every single one of them.
Was the city and Windsor Police ready for this, or did this catch you off guard with what transpired in the last 3 days?
Well, I'll speak for myself, and then the chief, certainly you can talk about your feelings on this. I think it's fair to say every single person in Canada has watched what's happened in Ottawa and been a little surprised with the number of folks who've been able to sustain their presence there for that long of a time. We have a very high degree of knowledge about the importance of this particular border crossing and our place in the world with respect to international trade. And so the Freedom Convoy has been here since the start of the protests. They've done rolling protests through down here on Church. Last weekend, there were over 850 vehicles that did a peaceful rolling protest on the weekend. And trucks and traffic was still allowed to move to and from the Ambassador Bridge. And so at no time, are you ever aware of when they're all of a sudden just going to stop and put it in park in the middle of the road? And that's part of the complicating factor here is that it's difficult to tease out who is part of the protest and who is not part of the protest in each circumstance. And you never know when the protest will escalate from being peaceful like it was to a situation like we have now, which is still peaceful, but certainly a lot more disruptive to the national economy.
Any other questions from the room?
Just to follow up on that, we had an indication that this was going to happen on that day at that time. There was some indication that this was going to happen. We were asking police about it that day before it occurred. Was there no indication? Did you know that this was going to happen? And if so, could you have prepared better for it?
So we had indication that this was going to happen, and we started preparing. Of course, we have partners provincially, we have intelligence information, and we were starting to prepare prior to Monday, and we took action when required in order to manage the situation as best we could.
Sorry.
Mayor Dilkens, you mentioned you've been hearing from residents, business owners with their complaints. I know it touched on here today, 100 people. Do you feel these 100 people are taking the city, the county, stateside, basically hostage?
Listen, living in a democracy, I think it's fair to say we all appreciate one of the hallmarks of democracy in a country like Canada is that you have the ability to peacefully protest and share your opinion. That is like a hallmark of our democracy. And that is okay. What is not okay is putting the livelihood of other families, other Canadians, and in this case, Americans as well, at risk. And that is precisely what's happening here. You have 100 people who are holding hostage part of our national economy. That is why this cannot be allowed to be sustained for any length of time. Action will have to be taken to reopen this bridge so the economy can continue to function. And certainly, if you could talk to these folks and get the top list, figure out who the leader was, that would be interesting. But if you can figure out what their list of issues are that you're trying to resolve, in some ways, my experience being here for almost 16 years, this brings me back to 10 years ago with the Occupy Wall Street movement, where it was about the 99% versus the 1%, and it was a leaderless movement, and no one knew how that would end. What was their ultimate goal? And in some cases here, it's the same way forward. The same situation. So the way forward, I think it's right for all levels of government to examine the rules and restrictions that are in place. Let's see whether they're all still appropriate. You see what's happening in Saskatchewan and Alberta. And I think, everyone should be looking at what those rules and restrictions are and figuring out what the path looks forward like, not just on the COVID front, but also making sure that we're doing what's right by all Canadians, which is getting this border crossing open so business can continue.
How much is this costing you in overtime?
At this time, I don't have any exact figures, but as you could imagine, the cost will be significant.
Into the hundreds of thousands, millions?
Again, I don't have exact figures. I can't estimate that. But again, we have officers 24/7 in the area, and bringing additional officers in just to maintain some of the traffic points that we have in place right now.
Ambassador Bridge sent out a statement yesterday. Have you talked to your counterparts in Michigan and Detroit?
I haven't spoken with American Detroit on this particular issue, but I did have a conversation and have been texting back and forth with Dan Stamper at the Ambassador Bridge. And so he's appreciative. He's expressed his appreciation for the work of Chief Mizuno and the Windsor Police Service. He understands that this is a complex issue and one that is not easily resolved. But of course, his hope is like our hope. We have a shared goal with the Ambassador Bridge in this regard is to get the bridge open and get traffic flowing once again.
Okay, we're gonna move online. Just give Dana an opportunity to moderate the questions that are appearing through the Zoom portal and our virtual participants. Just for Police Chief and the Mayor, if you could address the television set and the camera directly above it.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Our first question comes from Adrian Gobriel, City TV. Adrian, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Question, we'll start perhaps with the chief of police, if that's okay. When it comes to, you see that you were starting to prepare, that you had intel that was, that was leading you to believe that a protest such as this was coming. If you were prepared, then how did you let a group of truckers block the most important vital shipping routes for the U.S. and Canada?
So again, our preparations take into consideration many different things, which includes, we had rolling blocks through the city where 2 lanes were blocked, but traffic remained open for that northbound traffic. And again, as his worship had said earlier, actions by the police cause reactions, and that has to be taken into consideration as we prepare for this event. We did take some actions in order to mitigate some of the congestion in that area and reduce it, which has helped in our response to the situation.
Follow up?
As you both stated, the blockade of the Ambassador Bridge has provincial, national, and international implications. With that being said, what has led you to believe from the situation that has been unfolding in Ottawa and other protests across the country that these protesters are actually willing to speak with authorities and come to a resolution and move on?
So we have had ongoing discussions from the start of the protest with representatives from the different groups that are in the area. So those discussions are ongoing, which has led to opening of the northbound lanes for a period of time, and we now have control of those northbound lanes leading to the bridge.
Thank you. Next question comes from Eric Atkins at the Globe and Mail. Eric, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. My question is for the police chief. You said you respect the right of protesters to peaceful protests, but the mayor described this as an effective hostage taking. Given the importance of this crossing to the community and the country, what will it take for the police to take action to dismantle this?
So again, our priority is public safety and keeping the peace in the area. And the actions that we take will prioritize that, our public safety and keeping the peace. We will look at the actions of the demonstrators and we'll respond accordingly. Again, as I have said earlier, we're not going to tolerate illegal activities and we're going to take the action necessary to respond to that. It may not be immediate. We will conduct those investigations and make charges at the appropriate time.
Follow up?
If you say your job's to keep the peace, but your job's also to enforce the law. What will it take you to enforce the law in this case?
You're right. We still have to mitigate the risk to the public and the risk to our members of our community and everyone involved, including the protesters. And that figures into the decisions that we make as to what actions we will take in order to restore traffic flow into that area.
Thank you. Next question comes from Owen Wolter at windsorite.ca. Owen, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor Dilkens, Chief Mizuno. You mentioned that the Windsor-Essex community will not tolerate this level of disruption for too long. What sort of resources would the city and the police require, say from the OPP or from other police forces, or in terms of funding from the province, in order to clear this out if this does escalate?
So I'll defer to the chief on resources, and those could change. I mean, the conversations I've had, they can change based on the circumstances on the ground. So it could be 30 people at this very moment, and an hour from now, you may need 80 to deal with any escalation that may happen. But to provide context to some of the folks who are watching this and on the line, wondering why police aren't just going in there and with tow trucks and the number of officers and removing everybody, you have a number of people who are on the ground here, who are part of the protest group, who have outwardly stated that this cause is so passionate for them, that they feel such a passion for this particular cause that they're willing to die for. And I think one can appreciate that if you have people who hold that sentiment, the situation can escalate and become very dangerous for police and those members of the public in very short order. And I think it's fair to say that all of us don't want to see people get hurt. I want every officer to go home at the end of the day, as with the chief. And I want every person of the protester group and the members of the public who are moving through that area to be able to do it safely as well. And so in some cases here, guys, I'll be really honest with you, you're trying to have a rational conversation, and not every person on the ground is a rational actor. And so police are doing what's right by taking a moderate approach, trying to sensibly work through this situation to find a resolve where everybody can walk away, nobody gets hurt, and we resolve the situation and get the bridge open. It is a complex situation that is unlike many others that we've seen in the community. And a police response that escalates the situation would certainly be evaluated in a way that I think would be unkind to police at the end of the day. Now, I say all that, but I want to say that recognizing that I get that residents are frustrated by this. I get that they just want to see this go away. They're tired of some of these protests for certain causes related to COVID. These are residents who've gotten their vaccine, who don't mind wearing a mask and doing sensible things in the middle of a global pandemic. I hear you. I hear that you want this to end and you want these people to go away. And so do we. And so allow us to sensibly work through this so nobody gets hurt. And the ultimate goal that we all have, everybody in this room, is to get this international border crossing going, get our auto sector back in business with just-in-time delivery, make sure that the goods that are grown at the greenhouses in Essex County can get to market, and that we can continue to be strong contributors to the GDP of our nation.
Follow up.
Is a state of emergency on the table to access additional funding or resources?
It is not at this time, and I would submit that it's just not required. There is good flow of communication. Declaring a state of emergency won't do anything to change the situation. We have a good flow of communication. We've talked with the Premier, the Solicitor General, talked with federal ministers. Everyone is aware of the importance of this border crossing. They're all asking what resources are required to move forward. We have a very open ear, and as the chief had indicated, they're preparing the letter with that request that will be sent off later today. And we will deal with things with our federal and provincial counterparts in due course.
Thank you. The last question comes from David Walsh of Bloomberg Detroit. David, please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, great. You said you're trying to negotiate a settlement, Mayor, but it's multiple groups. It's sort of leaderless. Who are you talking to? What are the groups, and how do you go about doing this when it's such a disparate group?
So again, we have officers on the ground. We have officers who are trained in negotiations and liaising with the members of this group. We've asked for members of the protesters to step forward as the leaders of the group to have the discussions with the police, with our leaders that are on the ground in order to try and come to a sustainable resolution to this issue.
And one quick follow-up. I thought I heard only emergency vehicles could go northbound on Huron Church Road. The trucks are still getting across the bridge in the opposite direction, correct?
So there is, trucks are able to access the bridge from Wyandotte Street. Southbound traffic coming off the bridge is stopped. There's just one southbound lane open, and that's for emergency vehicle access.
Any further questions from the room?
Anybody in the room here? Dana, we're seeing none here in the room.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Mayor Dilkens for any closing remarks.
That's it. Thank you very much for being here, and we'll hold future press conferences as appropriate. Thank you very much.